Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Judy Blake. I'm with Family to Family Network and in Houston, Texas. And I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Leslie Lawson, who the two of us together are going to be presenting what to do if you disagree. Use your procedural safeguards. Next slide, please. So in the essence of saving time, we're just going to be reviewing a quick review of some of this information. Please know this is a safe space. Feel free to private message us questions or concerns. If you don't feel comfortable asking them out loud. For today only, it is okay to ask your questions as we go along. Correct, Leslie?
Yeah, if you have a question about the slide we're on, I don't want to get ahead and answer questions about a slide that's about to come up.
Yeah, so yes, go ahead, ask the question, and we are happy to answer them. We hope to finish within an hour. I will be sending the slides to you at the either this evening or over the weekend. I'll send you the slides all at once. Some of you are joining us for the first time. So to the others, you're going to be hearing this probably for the second and third time, and we apologize, but there are a few people who are joining us for the first time. So we apologize if you're hearing it again. Please remember, you know your child better than anyone else. You have to understand what is going on in the ARD meetings. If we have sent you slides and you're not sure what they mean, look at the link if we've given you a link. Everything can be found. A lot of this can be found on the website Texas Project First or in the IDEA manual. And it's really important that you learn it and try to understand it. If you still have questions, feel free to email Leslie or myself. She put our emails in the chat box. Just remember that everything that we do is based on what we call FAPE, F-A-P-E, and that is free, appropriate education. Schools must follow IDEA, that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We have given you the IDEA manual in both English and Spanish. We haven't been able to find hard copies of it, but you can download it and have it on your computer and you can print it. We are very happy to tell you that the IDEA manual is also in Vietnamese. If it were up to me, the manual would be in every language possible, but for now, we have English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So just remember the IEP is the Individualized Education Plan. It's the centerpiece of that federal legislation from the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. What is that What is that, the purpose of the IDEA? It's to make sure that all students who have disabilities and have that IEP, that Individualized Education Plan, or a 504 plan for that matter, that they have available to them a free, appropriate public education. It includes related services, and it is to prepare your child or loved one for further education, employment, and independent living. Your child may not want to pursue further education like my son didn't, but it prepared him for employment. Just remember that that IEP, it's a contract between you and the school. You as the parent have to advocate for your child. You have to understand what's going on and speak up for your child. Always, always understand what you are agreeing to. So in order to get ready, what should you do? Again, we've talked about this. Get draft copies of evaluations, present levels of academic performance, any goals, objectives. Do you have any reports from private doctors, speech therapists, occupational therapists, anything from your pediatrician, anything from a psychiatrist, a psychologist? Make sure you have all of that information. These things will help you get ready. Some of you had asked, especially when it comes to that independent evaluation, if you want to request it, or if your child has, when they have their FIE done, which is the full and independent evaluation, can you get copies of that before your ARD meeting? Sure, request it. Make sure you put everything in writing, because if it isn't in writing, it didn't happen. But make sure you read those documents ahead of time so that you know what people are going to talk about. This is really, really important because you want to be considered an equal member of the ARD/IEP committee. And if you have all of that information beforehand, and if you understand it, it will help during the actual ARD meeting. Question here, what do you do when the school says they are shorthanded and your child needs, hold on one second, and your child needs a smaller class ratio? So this is where you would not agree to something because it doesn't work for your child. So in answer to your question, what you want to do is understand that, you know, you feel badly that the school is shorthanded and short-staffed. We understand that. There's special education shortages all over the country. But parent, that's not your problem. The school has to find a way to put your child in the least restrictive environment possible and to make sure that their needs are met. So if your child needs a smaller class ratio, I don't know if you're referring to you want them to be in a general education class and a smaller class ratio. It's not so much that they can necessarily do that, but if they need a smaller class ratio, maybe there's resource classes. That's what my son did.
Or they could provide in-class support.
Exactly, that was my next answer. But
they have to follow whatever is in the IEP that you agreed to. So
exactly.
if you agree to what they're doing now and it needs to be changed, you're going to have to ask for a new IEP meeting to change things.
And if you have any other questions on that, parent, please feel free to email Leslie or myself. But the school being shorthanded, that is not a reason to not provide services. So it's meeting time. Try to bring someone if you can. It could be a friend, it could be a family member. Let them know what's going to be going on. You don't necessarily need to bring an advocate, but try to bring someone with you because they're just that second pair of eyes. And I think that really makes a difference. Make sure that they understand your concerns ahead of time. And they can be in charge of taking notes. Maybe they can follow the ARD agenda. They just need to support you during that meeting. Someone asked, what is a resource class you mentioned, Judy, about the small student staff ratio? Well, it wasn't, so every school is different, but, and granted, my son is 27, but he had resource classes. They were like co-teach classes. So we tried really, really hard to have my son in a mainstreamed, full inclusion English class. We tried. The teacher worked with him privately. I worked with him. It just wasn't working. Number one, the class size was too big. She was going over the information, you know, at a faster pace than my son could understand. And the concepts she was trying to explain, he just wasn't getting them. So rather than be in a general education, mainstream education class for English, he went to what they call and I don't even know if they use the term anymore, a co-teach class. So it's basically a teacher and a teacher's aide with maybe, half the amount of kids in the class, and they go at a pace that's better for him. This was in high school. Whether or not they do this in elementary school or middle school, I don't know. And schools can be set up differently and schools can be different. But that's something that you can ask about. As far as the actual meeting, bring your child to the meeting, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes. He or she doesn't have to stay for the whole time, but let them meet your child. Your child is more than an ARD document. They're more than IEP notes, and they should meet them. Once they're in high school, they're required to come. They don't have to stay for the whole time, but they really need to be there. Oh, one parent wrote that her son is in resource classes in elementary. That's great. Wonderful. Next slide, please. So again, during the meeting, ask questions. They're throwing out so many abbreviations. They've done these ARD meetings over and over and over again. If you don't understand something, say, can we please take a timeout? Can you please explain this to me? If they already explained it, then please ask again. It's no problem. You have the right to ask questions. This is your child. If they're making decisions, where's the data? How is that being supported? How is that data being collected? And ask for support. If you ask yes or no questions, you're going to get yes or no answers. So, asking questions like, can you show me the data? Or what makes you think that this method is better for my child? That's not a yes or no question. They have to explain why they think something should happen with your child. What's it going to take? Make sure that you document everything. If the school calls you to explain something, that's certainly fine, but then send a follow-up email and say, oh, thank you for calling me, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. From what I understand, you explained that Johnny will participate in this, this, and this, and he will be pulled out for this, or whatever it was that they told you. Can you please confirm that I understand the information correctly? Make sure they respond. Understand those procedural safeguards. Leslie's going to go over that in just a few minutes, along with what to do if you disagree. But that prior written notice, and Leslie, I think this is where you take over,
Okay.
really need to understand that. And I'll let people in.
Okay, and then I think there's a few questions if you want to check before we go on.
Let me look real quick. Yeah, one parent wants to connect with another parent. Melissa wrote, my son is in resource classes in elementary. Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're all caught up.
Okay, so we talked a little bit yesterday about prior written notice, and I just want to go over that in more detail. This is all in your procedural safeguards, which you should be provided at least once a year. And then we're also going to give you the link to get a copy of procedural safeguards. And that comes in many, many different languages. But it basically says you have the right to be given information in writing, when the school proposes to do something or refuses to do something. It could be about the identification of your child, whether or not they have a disability, right after they do their evaluation. They have to provide information about the evaluation, reevaluation, or if they're going to try to dismiss your child from special education. They can't just do that. You have to have notice, and it has to be based on new evaluation data if they're going to dismiss your child. You have the right to know about the placement, where your child's going to receive their special education, and how your child is going to be provided their education. Sorry, my clicker's not working really good today. Also, not many people are going to need this, but you do have a right to revoke your consent for special education services. If you ever decide you don't want your child to have special education services, and they would provide you written information about that. That's very unlikely, but it does happen sometimes. They also have to provide it, like I said, when they're proposing something new or refusing to do something that you asked for. They have to describe everything, all the information and all the evaluation procedures, assessments, and records that they use to make their decision. And they have to let you know about your protections, your procedural safeguards under IDEA, and tell you how to get a copy. So if they've already given you a copy, maybe you've lost it, they at least have to let you know how to get a new copy. They should also provide you with information about organizations that can help you understand the special education process, like Family to Family Network, the ARC, Partners Resource Network, Disability Rights Texas. That's all in that IDEA manual too, in the back. Several organizations are listed there. And they have to describe all the other choices and things they considered before they chose to make the decision that they did. And of course, during all of this, you have the right to disagree. So, we hopefully won't ever have to disagree, but sometimes you may need to disagree. And I don't want anybody to be afraid of that. The procedural safeguards are put there for a reason. You might feel intimidated to disagree, but don't let anybody make you feel bad about disagreeing with something that's very important, because the process, generally, anytime you use your procedural safeguards, the first thing the Texas Education Agency is going to tell the school district is to go back and have a resolution meeting with the parents. And that's where things generally get worked out. So don't be afraid of that. Of course, we don't want to be disagreeing about every little thing. We want to try to work with the art committee and come up with a solution. The notice should be written in your native language and easy to understand. So, and you can always ask for explanations about that. This is where you can find your procedural safeguards. And again, we're going to send you these slides so you'll have all these links, and definitely want to read over your procedural safeguards. Also, SpedText is a great website where you can go to find lots of information like your procedural safeguards. You can also chat online with somebody. You can email them, or you can speak with them on the phone. The individuals with the law for special ed is it's not black and white, it's very gray. So every question that you have is not going to be specifically answered in that specific law. So a lot of times if I'm unsure of something and I'm trying to help somebody, I'll go to SpedText. I like to chat with them online because then I can copy and paste everything they tell me and, plop it into an email and then use it if I'm communicating with the school district or with the teacher or with another parent. You can email them, you can talk to them, A lot of times they only want to provide you links to the regulations, but if you keep asking them specific questions in different ways, a lot of times they'll finally give you an answer. Sometimes you have to ask a question many times in many different ways to get a real answer. And that's the same in an IEP meeting too. So we talked a little bit yesterday about using an art agenda to keep organized. You can print one off. This is on our Texas Project First website. You can go and take a look at that, and it'll have, in the agenda, it'll have links to specific parts of the ARD meeting, which I find very helpful. And we also talked about using all the tools. You know, you may read the IDEA manual, you may look at your procedural safeguards or any of these, and maybe one makes more sense to you than the other. So definitely look at them all. Texas Project First is great. Also, and you can search by topic, whatever topic you're looking at. And also, again,
it's in English and Spanish.
Yes, yes. Texas Project First is in English and Spanish, and it's just a very well-written, parent-friendly website. So, know that you can disagree. We all know we can disagree, but you really need to know what steps to take if you do disagree. If you don't agree with the evaluation, we talked about getting an independent evaluation at the school's expense. If you don't agree with the program or the services, you'll be given an opportunity to write down what specifically you disagree about. Make sure that's documented somewhere. If you don't write it down, that it's documented in the minutes or somewhere. Because if you don't make that clear, they're going to think you're agreeing. A lot of the paperwork is different from district to district, but generally you have to sign your name and check agree or disagree. And I know a lot of meetings have been virtual, and so there's been a lot of confusion about that. Personally, I don't like to agree or disagree until I have a copy of every single page, including the minutes of the meeting, that I can read and make sure nothing's been written down wrong or changed from what we talked about before I give my agreement. So that's some of the things you could disagree about. The amount of speech therapy, for instance, or if they want to put your child in regular education without support, or if they want you to put your child in a resource or a life skills classroom and that's not something you agree with. Another reason you might disagree is if you don't understand everything in the ARD meeting, in the IEP meeting. If you don't understand everything that's happening and you're feeling overwhelmed, sometimes you can table the ARD meeting, which means there's no agreement or disagreement. Maybe you run out of time. That's another thing I wanted to talk about is, a lot of times they'll say, okay, we only have an hour for the ARD meeting. Well, no, they can't really put time limits on it. Maybe they only have an hour that day, but if you're not finished and you have more questions and you're not ready to agree, sometimes they'll table the ARD and continue it on another day that y'all all agree on. That's very different than disagreeing. If they refuse to do that and you don't feel ready to agree, definitely sign disagree, because that'll force it into a 10-day recess ARD anyway. So either way, you get to come back. So know that that is your right. And then we already talked about, making a statement and making sure that you're in disagreement about is documented. Okay, and I know Judy's going to check the chat in case we have any
Yes,
questions.
I sure am. Good
Um,
so far.
So if you do disagree, another meeting will be scheduled within 10 days, or it could be more than 10 days if you all agree that it needs to be more than 10 days. It doesn't have to be 10 days. And during that time, both sides generally gather more information, work together, maybe to come to some agreement before you go back. And but if you go back, it's your 10-day recess art and you still don't agree, you have to check disagree if you don't agree, because if you check agree, they're going to do whatever they've decided on. Now, if you check disagree and don't do anything after that, it's the same as agreeing, because you must take steps after you disagree if you want something to be changed. One thing I wanted to talk about is a facilitated ARD meeting. So if you know you're going to have a contentious ARD meeting and you don't think you're going to be in agreement, maybe you've had some informal meetings with developing the IEPs and what services and things like that, and you think it's going to be a contentious ARD meeting where you may not come to an agreement, you can also ask for a facilitated ARD. There are two different types of facilitated ARDs, and all of this is in that IDEA handbook that we recommend that you print out and read. A lot of the districts have people on staff to facilitate a ARD, and they are a neutral party. They keep you on track, and they try to help you have positive communication and, just stay on track, because, it's not really about what the school wants or what you want. It's about what your child needs to receive a free and appropriate education. So you could ask for that. If you are in disagreement, you can also ask for a state facilitated IEP meeting. And that's where the Texas Education Agency would provide an impartial person to come out and facilitate the ARD meeting. So just know those are options. They can be very helpful. And I already talked about that. I tend to get ahead of myself. Okay, another thing I wanted to talk about is your child's status during a disagreement. There's something called stay put, and it's really important. And it really comes in handy if they're trying to place your child in a more restrictive setting and you disagree with that. If that happens, you have 5 days to file for due process and invoke stay put so your child can stay in the same setting that they're currently in. That could also apply if they were trying to dismiss your child from special education and you didn't feel like they should be dismissed. There's many reasons that you may want your child to stay put, and that you would want to file for due process, invoke stay put. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go to due process, but it allows your child to stay put. And like I said, generally what happens is the Texas Education Agency is going to ask the school to have a resolution meeting with you, and that's where things generally get worked out. So don't be afraid of, doing this if you need to. So stay put only applies to due process. It doesn't apply to mediation or complaints. So those are the three ways to, those are the three things you have in your procedural safeguards to, if you disagree. You have mediation, the complaints process, and due process. And the complaint process is really helpful. If you file a complaint, not only do you have to put what your complaint is, you also have to put what the remedy should be, because TEA will consider that. And the example, I kind of gave this example yesterday, I think, like there was a parent in a school district and they didn't want, the child did qualify for speech and language therapy, and the district didn't have a speech and language pathologist on that campus, and they wanted to wait till the summer to provide compensatory services. And really, that's not appropriate to wait that long to provide a child with services that they need. So the parent filed a complaint, and their resolution to their complaint was that the school district pay for private speech and pay their, well, they didn't even put pay their mileage, but the Texas Education Agency did grant that. And they also paid for mileage, and they paid for the child to go to private speech therapy because the school couldn't provide that. And it was in the IEP that the child did need that service. So that's just one example where a complaint might work. So I know that we have given you a ton of information, and I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed. I know when my son was young and I was learning all this, I felt overwhelmed a lot.
Me
And
too.
yeah, and I learned to just take one thing at a time, worry about the most important things first. And when you get one thing fixed, move on to the next thing. And I will tell you that I still participate in trainings and webinars like this. And every day, even though my child's out of school now, but all through his schooling and even now, every time I participate in a training, I learn something new. And maybe
Absolutely.
I heard it in another one, but maybe it took me 3 times to hear something before it was like an aha moment. And I
That's
don't
right.
know if you're like that, Judy.
All the time. All the time. All of a sudden, it's like the light bulb goes off in my head. And I've been told, I actually have 2 jobs, and my second job is with a lot of doctors and child neurologists and social workers. And I've been told I am not an auditory learner. So I'm very visual. And if you want to go to the next slide, Leslie,
Okay.
I've been told that, so if I hear something, I'm not gonna necessarily always comprehend it. Maybe I need to see a visual of it. Maybe I need to see a flow chart, some kind of diagram. So absolutely, absolutely. Leslie, that was great. Thank you. So this survey link, which I'm going to type in the chat box, is different from the other 2, because you'll notice this one at the end says September 22. The other one said September 21, and the other one said September 19. So what I'm going to do is post it in the chat box. Several of you have asked me, oh, do I need to fill out the survey for each day? Yes, we would love for you to do that, because again, we need that information. It's how Leslie and I learn, how we might change something around. Maybe we'll do it differently next time. So please, please complete the survey for each day. Each link is specific to the presentation that we've given for that actual day. Questions? Comments? Thoughts?
Did we look at the chat box?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Somebody had sent me a couple of private messages. They needed the links again. So if you needed, this was one parent that had asked, the links, a couple of the links that Leslie mentioned, spedtex.org, and that's spedtex.org, and Texas Project First, which is all written out, FIRST.org. Those are 2 really great websites that Leslie and I use a lot.
I'm thinking that we don't have, do we still have translation right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So somebody had just written, hold on one second, Leslie. Okay, let me move up because I want to go in the order that they were received. Do you offer understanding the data for FIEs. I seem to struggle with that. Yeah, I did too. And for those of you who might need a refresher, the FIE is that full and individual evaluation that should be completed on your child every 3 years. So we don't really offer that. I think that it's really, really important that you bring that up in the ARD meeting. Depending on who's doing the FIE, maybe it's a diagnostician, ask to meet with them.
Yeah, I would do it before you have the meeting to go over it
Absolutely.
though.
But yeah, I don't really, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a licensed school psychologist. We're not neuropsychologists. But yeah, some of it can be really, really challenging. So I would ask ask to meet with them before the meeting so that you do understand it.
Yeah, I would get a copy of the report, of course, and go through that whole report and highlight everything you don't understand and try to schedule a meeting with the diagnostician to ask all your questions. And I know they're probably going to say, oh, but we're going to go over that in the meeting, and
Totally
say,
different.
well, yeah, I have questions before I get in the meeting.
Absolutely. Because then you can bring them up to everybody and you can't remember everything. It's impossible.
Plus, if they're explained to you in the right way, that you may not have a problem with whatever that is.
Thank you, Amber. We're happy this has been so helpful for you. Any experience on a child getting private tutoring on any subject, say reading, from the school? So some schools I know have reading specialists. I know the district has reading specialists. And if your child has been diagnosed with some type of, reading disability, like maybe dyslexia, wonderful organization called Nyehouse Education Center. They're located in Bel Air on Bissonnette, and it's Neuhaus. And they have, family navigators, if you will. And they are kind of the go-to people for dyslexia. If your child has some other reading challenge, I'm kind of wondering, what's that about? Have they been evaluated? And what is the reading disability?
Yeah, because generally the school is not going to pay for private tutoring.
Nope.
So yeah, autism is not a reading disability necessarily, but if your child is struggling with reading, then they make sure they're evaluated, because there's 5 components of learning to read. I probably can't tick them off, but it's like phonemic awareness, vocabulary, comprehension, and there's a couple of others, fluency, one more, I can't think of it, but they should be evaluated and see what a lot of kids with autism have trouble with comprehension. And so they do have specific peer-reviewed, research-based reading interventions that they can use with your child. But you would have to talk to them and hopefully make them that happen. My son used a specific reading program was when he was in school, and you want to make sure whatever program they're using, looks at before, during, and after, and collects data. Any evaluation.
Excuse me for interrupting. The parent is asking how to get evaluated for reading. And if your child has autism, that doesn't mean they have an issue with reading. My son has autism and has no trouble reading. There's got to be something else separate. And she's asking if getting evaluated for reading is part of the FIE.
It could be. Generally, if the child's young, they're not going to address that early on, but you could ask for some type of reading evaluation at any point, and I would put that in writing.
Definitely put it in writing. And ask the special education chairperson, ask your child's teacher, is there, who can test my child for reading? Another question, can your child qualify / test for GT, which is gifted and talented, in kindergarten like other kids if she is in special education for behavior, but academically she is very, very strong? So I think it's really important to look at why is your child acting a certain way. If your child is in special education only for behavior, but they're not being challenged academically, well, that's not good either.
Mhm. And
So-
Amber is correct what she.
Yeah, exactly. I was
Yeah.
just going to say thank you. Yeah, your child can be gifted and talented and have other disabilities. I know someone who is gifted and talented in history and science and took advanced placement classes for those. Had
So-
autism, had ADHD.
Another thing everybody needs to look at, you can find a lot of information on your school district's website because every district has different programs. For instance, Katy ISD has a specific autism program. Well, they have more than one, and so does Spring Branch. Some schools don't have that. Also, if you go to the school district's website and click on the board tab for the board of directors, there's board policy. Every school district has board policy. So each school district develops their own policy about certain things like GT. And you can click on the board policy and search by topic, and you'll find what their policy and procedures are, like for GT testing or whatever. But if they tell you your child can't be in GT because they have a disability, ask them to put that in writing, because that would be a civil rights violation. So there are kids that they call twice exceptional, meaning that they have a disability and they are also gifted and talented. So the board policy will shed a lot of light on things like that and how it's done in your particular district. If you guys ever have trouble locating any of that, please reach out to me and I'll help you.
And I think it's really important that there's so much information, as Leslie was mentioning. She and I learn new things every day. And I think it's important to realize that you all are learning new information every day. And to be quite honest with you, some of the teachers you're working with are learning new information every day. As I mentioned earlier, there are staff shortages in special education around the country. So sometimes people are just kind of thrown into something and they are not trained properly. So maybe you might need to educate somebody in the ARD meeting and say, this doesn't quite make sense. And I don't think this is quite the case. Any recommendation? Oh, go ahead, Leslie. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so, somebody brought up earlier about, they said they're short-staffed and they can't do something. They can't use lack of funds or lack of personnel to deny your student a service that the evaluation has shown they need. So if the school can't provide it, then guess what? Then maybe you need to file a complaint and they'll have to contract with somebody else to provide that service outside of the school. So just keep that in mind.
So a parent had asked any recommendations on Katy or Cypress Independent School District, any particular school that has good service. We are going to be moving. So I think it's really, really important to know that, in my opinion, and Leslie, I think you agree, it's not as though there's ever a good or bad school district or school. Teachers rotate all the time, principals rotate all the time. It's how your child connects with that teacher and what is the makeup of the other students in the class. There's teachers that I have loved, and I know other people in the same class, the same year, they didn't like them at all. There are some teachers that I've had that really didn't connect with my kid. And other people thought they were just fabulous. So one parent wrote, Lamar Consolidated has been good for us, which is
Yeah.
great.
It depends on what you're wanting too, because like
Exactly.
when my son was little, the important thing for us was him being included in regular education with appropriate support. But some people want to, if they have autism, they want an autism specific program that's a very segregated program, but it might be a good program for your child. And Katy is a great district if you want something like that. So a lot depends on what you want. I do highly recommend joining the different Facebook groups. There's a Katy autism group, the Cypress.
Yeah, I like the Katy one. Yep.
Yeah.
Cypress.
And like Judy said yesterday, you're not going to agree with everybody, but you can get a variety of information from those sites.
And there's Magnolia Moms.
Yeah,
that's another popular one. I really love the Katy one because Cynthia Reese has been around for years, and she has an adult son with disabilities. And so I just think it's really important, if your son has ADD or ADHD, however you want to call it, there's the ADDA Southwest region. Her name is Pam Esser, and she's on Facebook, ESSER. I'll type that in the chat box if you have a child specifically with those kinds of
Another thing too, I think, is when you join a support group, whether it be on Facebook or somewhere else, and there are Spanish speaking support groups.
Yes.
If you need information about those, please contact Christina at our office. She speaks Spanish. I think when you connect with other parents who are in your situation, it really helps you feel like you're not alone. And you, like I said yesterday, you get a lot of the best ideas from other parents who have older kids that have been there and done that. So it really is helpful.
So Yuko had asked about, is NIHouse only for dyslexia? What about autistic children struggling with reading comprehension? Again, why is somebody struggling with reading comprehension? It's important that you really have a good evaluation to find out where is the issue. Is it because they have dyslexia that they're having trouble comprehending, or can they read just fine, but something isn't processing as to why they are not comprehending? I would call NIHouse and ask them what they suggest.
Yeah, because they may have a reading disability that maybe isn't necessarily dyslexia. Maybe they're just struggling with phonemic awareness where they can't sound out the words, or maybe they're only struggling with comprehension. And there are specific programs to help with those specific things.
Sure. As far as suggesting, diagnosticians, yeah, I've got a few that I've used that I really like. The school will have theirs. So if you want that full and independent evaluation, I think it's important that you ask the school to send you a list and then go from there. Keep in mind, though, that one of the reasons the parents disagree with schools is because the school thinks something is not needed because it isn't what they call educationally relevant. Remember, I was mentioning the other day about the whole occupational therapy? Well, my son can hold a pencil, so he doesn't need occupational therapy. Well, he still could really use it because you can't even read what he's writing. But I think it's important that, if you want that independent evaluation, ask the school to send you a list of people that they use, because again, they would be the ones to pay for it.
And a lot of times the schools don't tell you about some specific programs they do. and not all school districts use them, but like some good programs that have been used in the past. Like if your child's struggling with handwriting, there's handwriting without tears. And a lot of the therapy centers, some of the therapy centers use that, but some of the school districts use that. Also, like if they're struggling with math, there's something called Touch Math that has been very helpful with helping kids with math, learn math. It's a whole different way of learning math, but it's my friend's son used it and it was very helpful for him. And then there's tons of different reading programs out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but any good program is going to do a baseline to know where your child's at. Kind of like if I went to Weight Watchers. If I go to Weight Watchers, they're going to weigh me and they're going to measure my fat content and know where I'm starting from. And then they're going to apply the program. And if I don't follow the program for the right amount of time, for the right amount of days, it's probably not going to work. And then at the end, when they evaluate where I'm at periodically, if I'm not making progress, maybe that's not the right program for me. So you want to make sure whatever program they're using with your child is used with integrity and how it's supposed to be used.
I think we got everything. And Leslie, we are actually ending at 1 o'clock. Is that not like the best?
Yeah.
So I put the survey link in the chat box. Leslie, if you could go to the very last slide, I believe it's a thank you slide.
Okay.
Let's see. And I love, you can tell that I love my donkey from Shrek asking you to fill out the survey. Who doesn't love Will Ferrell and Elf about asking questions? And so we tried to make it a little more visually appealing to look at today.
Yeah, and please save our email addresses because as you go on, questions are going to come up. Shoot us an email, give us a call, and we'll, if we can't answer it, we'll try to point you in the right direction. And just know that we're here for you. And
you're not alone. It may take us a few days.
Yes.
Because we get really backed up sometimes. And lastly, we're so happy you have enjoyed these trainings. Yes, they were grant funded, but there is a ton of case management that we do when we answer those questions, when we answer those emails, when we take your calls. If you're able to make a donation, please go on our website, f2fn.org, and you'll see the donate button. Please click on it, and we welcome every dollar that you can donate.
And we do have somebody that speaks Spanish if you need.
Yes, we sure do. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me, Leslie. Also, the classes are going to be repeated in October and November. I'll be sending you again reminders if you want, because some people like to hear the information like me and Leslie 2 and 3 times. So if you want to join us again, that's great. Just feel free. Well, I think that does it was helpful. We are thrilled you all joined us. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.